Is it too late to get an iPad? I know you're probably thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean, is it too late to get an iPad? No, what I mean is it too late to get the current generation of iPad? That is to say, the ones that are out right now, because the next ones are coming out. Be honest, like, I can make this video every single year because this question is going to be the same. But I'll get into some specifics about the current versions of iPad and iPad Pro and even the iPad mini versus what's coming out, what we expect to come out, and should you just wait a little bit longer? Because sometimes that is the answer. But this time I'm not so sure about that. So let's get into that right after this.
This is, you listening to Travis.
What up, players? Welcome back. And for all you new people, welcome. My name's Travis and I do tech videos every single week and have a blast doing them. And today we're going to talk about whether or not you should wait to buy your new iPad or just go out and get one right now because you're getting some good deals right now. Like, what are you waiting for? Why don't you have an iPad right now? Now, as many of you know, I love the iPad. I use the iPad Pro to edit all my videos here on the channel. I absolutely love it. Been using an iPad Pro for many years. Started with the iPad Pro 2018, the 11-inch version, and have upgraded each year. Now, not every single upgrade from that has actually been worth it. The 2018 to 2020, for example, totally not worth it. And in that particular instance, you should not have upgraded from the 2018 to the 2020. And are we in that same situation now? Not really. Let's start at the base model iPad. You know, the ones that are like $329. Sometimes you go on sale for $300. These are the ones that, while they change from year to year, it's just kind of not that big of a deal. They're not high-end looking devices anymore. They get the job done and they're really good for what they're for. And at the price, I mean, it's hard to beat them for a tablet. But quite frankly, from year to year, not that much of a difference. Every so often, maybe you get like Apple Pencil support, but it's always the old one, or maybe the keyboard support's better or something, but it's never really that awesome. And this year, we don't expect to see anything much different from what has already worked. Essentially, if you've gotten a really good deal on a current gen iPad, there's no reason to wait. Yeah, you'll get a better processor if you wait, and maybe it'll have Apple Pencil 2 support. Maybe. I mean, probably not, because for Apple Pencil 2 support, you'll notice that most of those are on devices that have square edges, so they can charge right on the side and use magnetic charging coolness. Like my iPad Pro. Like, I don't know about you, but that never gets old. So if you're just out there trying to get an iPad, maybe you use it for the living room, or maybe you're using it as a travel tablet, or maybe you're even using it as your primary tablet and you don't need a whole bunch of power, the current gen iPad is definitely going to get you covered for that. I think the one change we may see this year is a slightly bigger display, a little bit more than 10.5 inches or right around 10.5 inches. But to be honest, like, it's not that much different than what's already out there. So at the end of the day, you probably, if you can get a great deal for it right now, should not wait for the base level iPad. What about the iPad mini? Well, this is the iPad that I have been waiting for and was super excited for this past year. I talked about it a lot. The new redesign of the iPad mini had me absolutely hyped, and it has really lived up to that. Plus, with the A15 processor and the Apple II Pencil support, this thing is a beast. Although there is one thing that I would upgrade this thing for, which, by the way, I don't think we're going to see a new version of the iPad mini. If you remember, we had to wait a couple of years for this version to come out in the first place. I honestly feel like Apple believes this is the redheaded stepchild of all the Apple iPads, and I disagree. This thing is so amazing and such an amazing size. And with the power to performance ratio on this thing, I mean, I think it's the best iPad that you can buy. Having said that, there's one thing that I would change. And that is, for whatever reason, this is the only iPad where I really notice a difference between 60 hertz display and 120. I know that sounds weird, but no matter what other Apple device I use, I don't really notice it as much as I notice it on this. And while sure, a mini LED would be awesome, I don't really care about that. I actually more am interested in 120 hertz display. So as soon as that happens, I'm definitely upgrading from the mini. But for you, if you can get the mini, especially get it at a good price, no reason to wait. That brings us to the iPad Air. Now, this is probably getting an update this year and kind of needs one, because the iPad Air is this middle ground iPad between the base level and the Pro for people who want something a little bit nicer, but not quite Pro level. And the thing is, this thing needs an upgrade badly. First of all, it's only at 64 gigs and we're back on the A14 processor. At this point, it's in this weird kind of middle ground of almost good enough, but not as good as even the iPad mini. Now, if it gets the mini LED and of course 128 gigs of base storage, 100% worth waiting for. I would probably say, unless you're gonna get a screaming deal right now on an iPad Air, this is gonna be one of the only devices I'm gonna say, yeah, you should absolutely wait. Wait before you buy an iPad Air at this point. Now, as far as the iPad Pros go, For me, only one do you need to wait for, and that would be the 11-inch, mainly because we expect that to get the mini LED, and the differences between those two, between the LCD and the mini LED, listen, you can see them. There is a difference. It's not necessarily huge, but if you're going to spend the money anyway, and you're going to use a Pro iPad, you should get the best display. So I would probably wait if you don't want the 12.9 inch. Now, if you do have the 12.9 inch, or you want to get the 12.9 inch, whether or not you should wait really has a lot to do with what you think the M2 processor is going to bring above and beyond the M1. Now, of course, it's going to be more powerful. The battery life might be better. And of course, all the specs are going to tell us is going to be so much better. But the problem is this thing is already way more powerful than any of the apps on it. Now, you may remember all the controversy about pro level apps on the iPad Pro that we never really got to see. So there's a whole bunch of power harnessed in this thing that's not being used, including a high-end version of the 12.9 with 16 gigs of RAM, which still blows my mind because it's really not being used. And yeah, you can say you can open up more apps and stuff, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. The processing power that's already in this thing is already above and beyond anything you can put on it. Whether or not you want to wait for the newer version really comes down to what do you really need? Do you even need an iPad Pro? If you feel like you do, and you need to get work done right now, I really don't see the point in waiting. Just go ahead and get it. Again, unless you're getting the 11-inch, in which case, wait, I guess. But for me, the iPad Pro series of products is kind of a problematic product line anyway, because we thought maybe and we hoped that we would get these professional level apps that would differentiate them from the iPad Air. There really is very little difference between them, just a little bit of display. And of course we have the newer processor, but we can't really use it above and beyond what's already out there. So what's the point? That's a great question. Now, a while back, I did a video where LumaFusion, one of the top apps that I use, upgraded and somehow either took better advantage of the M1 or something where the processing times are like almost halved. It became an instantly new device to me because when I first bought the M1 iPad Pro and used it in my editing software, it kind of worked the same as the previous one. But for whatever reason, the software upgrade really made a huge difference. And that could still be the case for other software companies. But to be perfectly honest, without full-on professional level apps for the iPad Pro, this is just more of a spec flex. And I've been talking about this for a long time. Apple doesn't really tend to do a lot of spec flexing where you have just a big spec device just for the simple fact of having the big spec device. But this thing is overly powered and doesn't really do much beyond what an iPad Air can do, or even a base iPad, which is kind of crazy. Now, sure, you can edit HDR content on it because you have an HDR display. I get that, but how many people are actually doing that? I mean, even though I edit on my iPad Pro, I'm not editing HDR content. And sure, there's going to be a couple people out there, but are there really enough people doing that it makes sense for Apple to invest so much money in R&D for this device? Like, are there that many people doing that? I would think probably not. And the question has never been answered. What the heck are we doing with the 16 gigs of RAM on the 1 terabyte version of this past generation's iPad Pro? Like what? Why? Why did we do that? Why? And will it ever be used? Like at this point, I'm starting to think no. I feel like we all got trolled. I talked about that earlier in the year. If you missed that video, you should go check it out. But make sure you hit the subscribe button and tell me, are you going to wait for your next iPad? Are you going to buy one now? I've already told you what I think. Let me hear what you think in the comments below. And I'll see you next time. Peace and love.